How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, good morning, Dave. Thanks for taking some time out on your Saturday morning. As I prepare for my trip to Guadalcanal this summer, I realized that I know much more about the battles in the East, Alligator Creek, Bloody Ridge, and even more about the battles on Mount Austin than I know about the battles along the Matanikau River. And I understand from your research that that was the longest portion of the campaign, and in a lot of ways, the most significant. So I wondered if you might be able to summarize that for me, talk a little bit about the importance, and be sure and tell me some more about your book.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah. So, how much time we got? You got a few days. Um,
Yeah, I know it's a lot to talk about in a short amount of time.
that's all right, and I'm glad to you've asked, and I'm very happy to discuss it. As you said, it's part of my upcoming book. It's um, it's going to be focusing on the I call it Guadalcanal's longest fight. So it basically focuses around the Matanikau region and in Point Cruz region. So basically 1 mile by 1 mile um, part of the terrain. So yeah, it was the longest fight, and I call it the longest fight because basically seen fighting from August 1942 all the way up until January 43. Sustained, protracted, long fighting, and so that's why it bears the title Guadalcanal's longest fight. So in that basically 5 month period, there were six major engagements, and probably, I don't know, it could be hundreds of smaller engagements if you look at anything from patrols to small skirmishes to small actions, they call it. So it was basically a seesaw back and forth battle between the Japanese and the Americans, back and forth over the Matanikau River, and a 1 mile west of it to Point Cruz. So from that small area, basically 1 mile by 1 mile. Um, Very important, very pivotal to the campaign. But it's overlooked, I guess, in regards to many of the other engagements or battles of the campaign. The main reason for writing my book, because I've lived there for 3 years, um, and one of the things that kept popping up was the tourist groups or even in the popular books of the battles, they never really go into detail of the Matanikau battles. They overlook it, or they don't even mention it at all. And the more I deep dive into the campaign, the Matanikau kept popping up. How they were either the Japanese were trying to take it, move across it, or the Americans were actually moving across it, trying to take it, setting up defenses. So, and just kept, I'm thinking, hold on a minute, why is this so important, but no one discusses it? And I really had to deep dive into that and have a think about it. So I had a few theories. One was the Matanikau battles was where the Americans and the Japanese seen victories and defeats. And especially when you look into the November to January phase, it was almost as resembled the Great War, as they call it in Australia here, or World War One. So the 6 week stalemate there, and it was just a long, hard, just nasty, bloody slog. So there's no glory there. Like I said, there was defeats and victories. So if you look at the other battles, say, for example, Battle of Tenaroo or Ilu or Alligator Creek, or the Battle of Edson's Ridge or Bloody Ridge, there were very important engagements, but they were localized, standalone engagements. You never seen in the campaign, they were never fought over more than once. So Alligator Creek was never only fought one battle, and Edson's Ridge was fought one battle. Even though some accounts put like John Basilone and the October battle on Edson's Ridge, which is not true. It was fought, as you know, it was fought to the east, hundreds of yards to the east of Bloody Ridge. So, but that was a good place for people to, when they return, say veterans or families or tourists, when they return, you could go to Alligator Creek, because that was a great American victory. You go to Bloody Ridge, great American victory, and they're standalone. And And they're basically, until a few years ago, they're basically well-preserved battlefields. Good places to visit, nice and easy places to visit. Good places to relive the past and I wouldn't say celebrate, but recognize and remember the battles or there. But then another thing about the Matanikau region, in 1943-44, that area, which was coconut groves and jungle ravines and kunai grass ridges, was built over by the Americans in 43-44. As you know, they built a giant logistical and training base there. So basically concreted it over. So a lot of the battlefields were gone, obliterated. So when later visitors came to the battlefields and veterans, they said, "Oh, where did you fight?" And they said, "Well, around here." And you look at it, it's just buildings and concrete, so you really can't, I guess, depict it. And plus, too, a lot of the guys, the veterans, didn't want to relive the memories that occurred around the Matanikau. As we will discuss, it was not a great place to fight. You'll see. And I think that was some of the main reasons why the Matanikau is not discussed as it is today. And once again, you look at Mount Austin and Galloping Horse. That's a great place to visit, stand alone, it's well preserved, and you can really see what occurred there 80-something years ago. That's the main reasons I thought, well, I've got 104, not all of them are Guadalcanal books, but I got 104 Guadalcanal books. So I don't know how many books. I'm hoping I have them all, but I don't. But you can just see there's a vast amount of Guadalcanal material. What's been written on Guadalcanal, as you know, there's three-dimensional campaigns. You got air, naval, and ground. So there's still material out there. But I've seen there was definitely a need to discuss the ground campaign involved around the Matanikau region, these pivotal battles. Because once again, and another thing too, I was thought about this, another reason why it's not well known, because the 1st Marine Division, they left in December. So some of the hardest fighting, well, they did some hard fights there, but some of the hardest fighting occurred in late November all the way to January, which the 1st Marine Division was basically not part of, and they were on the island, but they were leaving. So that's where you see the U.S. Army, and more importantly, the 2nd Marine Division, which a lot of people don't even know the 2nd Marine Division were on the island. And then you get the whole mopping up myth, which is one of my pet peeves. I hate that term, mopping up myth. It was certainly not a mop up, especially for the U.S. Army. It wasn't a mop up. I mean, in November, it was a stalemate. Both sides were offensively spent. And it took reinforcements with the 25th Infantry Division, U.S. Army, to come in to basically allow the Americans in January to renew their offenses. And when they renewed their offenses, it started in Mount Austin and the Matanikau region again, the second push. So I'm happy to go through the basics of how it started and just work our way through each the battles or engagements.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I'll see if I can run these maps again. It's been a while, so let's see how we go. So what I'll do here, I'll show an overall map just to get some orientation of basically where the Matanikau is to Henderson Field and the American perimeter, because some people don't know. It's only 5 miles from the American perimeter to the time, which is Henderson Field, which is Honolulu International Airport today. So it's roughly 5 miles from there due west to the Matanikau River. So I'll show this map here. So this will show the actual October offenses, and I'll go there a bit later, but this will show the I guess, orientation. So on the far right is Henderson Field, and you got the Lunga River, and then if you go due left, where all those red arrows are, that's the Matanikau. So it's 5 miles from Henderson Field to the Matanikau River. So that's a bit of an orientation. And that little arrowhead-looking thing, or I guess you could call it arrowhead, to the far left, sticking out in the ocean, that's Point Cruz. So from Point Cruz to the river, where those 2 red arrows are, is roughly a mile. Well, a little more than a mile. It's 2,630, depends on where you measure from. Yeah, 2,630 yards. So yeah, that's a bit of an orientation. So we'll go to a bit of a setting the stage. So as you know, August 7th, 1942, the Americans landed. They landed at Tulagi, surrounding islands, Gavutu, Tanambogo, and then roughly an hour later, they landed on Guadalcanal at Beach Red or Red Beach. And then the Japanese had a garrison there, mainly the 11th and 13th construction units, comprised mainly of Korean and Formosan laborers, with some Japanese engineers sprinkled in, as I call it. So they were there building that airfield, and they almost had it complete. So that was going to be the staging base for Operation FX, which is the invasion of Fiji and Samoa, which was canceled due to Midway. But they were already had plans, and they said, well, we'll complete this airfield as a main staging base if we continue to go further down. But if not, we've got an airfield here anyway. So it almost had it complete. So when the Americans landed and naval ships started coming in, there was a Japanese Imperial Navy, because they were all Imperial Navy construction units, named Captain Monson. So Captain Monson gave orders to all the troops, basically grab what you can for 3 days at least, head due west to the Matanikau River, because they knew it was a natural defensive area plus a good rallying point. So as many guys as they could, and the word got to them, because there was roughly about 3,000 of them, they headed to the Matanikau. A lot of them went to the jungles in all directions, especially these Korean laborers. And that's how you see the Americans were rounding them up for a good week after that. But the core unit, especially the two security companies they had, which is the Special Naval Landing Force, guard companies, not Japanese Marines, that's not the term, it's just a fallacy, but they were Special Naval Landing Troops. So they're combat trained. So they're dug in on the Matanikau. So when the Marines landed under Major General Vandergrift, the commander, they said they expected at least 5,000 Japanese troops, including a reinforced Japanese infantry regiment. And then you've got Colonel Getchy, who was the division intelligence officer, had made that recommendation. So the biggest thing they wanted to do was find the original garrison. Where's these guys at? If we can find the original garrison, then we can destroy them, and then we can rid the island of the Japanese, and we'll have our own airfield, complete airfield, and there we go. So their main goal, they had 4 tasks when they first landed. They're established. One is to take all the supplies they were dumped at Red Beach, which is 1,600 yards to the west, and bring them into the perimeter to protect them, because it was a major risk. I mean, all that cluster of supplies, the Japanese could have did a good raid, bombing raid, and they were limited with supplies anyway, due to the transports and cargo ships leaving. So, and then they had to complete the airfield, and then they had to find, or they had to dig in and establish a beach perimeter, because they thought the Japanese were going to do an amphibious assault, a directed amphibious assault. And the 4th priority was to find the regional garrison. So the 5th Marines had the left side of the perimeter around Kukum. So the 5th Marines, starting on the 9th of August, started sending patrols due west to find the regional garrison. Like I said, they started rounding up some of these labor guys who were in the jungles, and they started pulling them back. And then some of the patrols on the 9th had one patrol that went to the mouth of the Matanikau River, and they got hit pretty hard by a Japanese patrol. And that was the first really resistance they encountered. So they pulled back. I think they lost 2 wounded, and they pulled back. A bit of intelligence started coming in. Okay, well, there's some Japanese there. Send a couple more patrols. All the patrols started getting hit there. And they go, well, we think there's definitely a small group of Japanese there, and they're defending that river, and they're dug in. So is this the main body? We still don't know. So that's led to them capturing a Japanese warrant officer, who basically gave him some information. Look, there's a lot of Japanese, about 1,000 of them, near the Matanikau River or on the other side of Point Cruz, who wants to surrender. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but this led to the infamous Getchy Patrol. And, that's an episode. In fact, I've done an episode on him in itself. So long story short, the Getchy Patrol went. They didn't find the thousands of Japanese. Unfortunately, they all died except for 3. But what they did encounter was strong resistance at the Matanikau, because they landed in the wrong area. They landed right at almost at the mouth of the Matanikau, about 200 yards due west, right into the Japanese defenses, where they had zigzag trenches and machine guns and mortars and everything dug in there, and at least 300 Japanese with the security forces. So they knew at that stage this had to be the main Japanese garrison, right? Even though we knew there's thousands of them, but there's definitely a large contingent around that area due to the information received, and plus the resistance we encountered. And plus, when they killed the Getty patrol, didn't impress the Marines one bit, so they wanted a bit of payback. And plus, here was an opportunity to maybe destroy the original garrison. So on the 18th and 19th of August, the first Battle of Matanikau occurred. So they sent, I'll add this here. What I'll do, I'll enlarge it and talk about it. So what they did, they sent 3 companies of the 5th Marines. They sent B Company, the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, L Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and I Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. So the plan was L Company was going to, the day before, move on the east bank of Matanikau and cross at a place called the One Log Bridge, which is basically was 2 coconut logs, improvised bridge. It was 2,000 yards down the river that the Japanese had made. So they're going to cross there, move over, and get on Hill 73. So Hill 73 is where the U.S. Memorial is today, a monument. So anyone who goes to Guadalcanal, I recommend you go there. So they're going to go there and stage the night before. And I Company was going to go by Higgins boats and land at a place called Cucambona, which is another probably 5 miles due west. And they were going to land there and proceed back up the coastal track, which was a pre-government road. And so you can see it to the top left in this photo. It's a little track. Then they were going to come in the back door of the Japanese. So there was a classic hammer and anvil. They were going to use B Company there to push across the sandbar, the mouth of Matanikau, and hold the Japanese in place. And then they were going to envelop them with L Company and then come in behind them with I Company. So on the morning of the 19th, L Company went to the ridges there. They started engaging, and then they started sweeping down. At the same time, B Company tried to go across the mouth of Matanikau there, and they got hit pretty hard, and it stopped them. So they didn't proceed across the sandbar. But L Company moved through. They managed to cut the Japanese, go through the village, cut them off, and then they proceeded to have the battle and actually destroyed every one of the Japanese there. I Company had got held up and didn't proceed to the back. But you can see at the top there, Getty location. That's where the Getty patrol landed. So this photo was taken on the day of the battle. So it's quite an amazing photo. You can see the village there. That was a pre-war village. It was burned on the 27th of August. But yeah. So that was the first time, the first battle of Matanikau. And they actually wiped out the 2 guard companies there, the 84th Guard Unit. That's what they were. So that was that one. So at that stage, at the first battle of Matanikau, they knew that some of the Japanese had escaped, but they went, well, we've probably wiped out their major resistance, so the other ones can just die in the jungle. We're not really worried about them. But then you got to remember, this is the 19th of August. So what happened on the 21st of August, if you can remember?
21st of August is the Battle of Santa Cruz, not Santa Cruz.
You're a naval guy. Go to ground.
Eastern Solomons.
Yeah, so take off your naval cap.
Oh, okay.
Put your land cap on.
That's
Alligator Creek.
Alligator Creek. Uh-huh.
Yep, Alligator Creek, Battle of Alligator Creek. So obviously all the attention was drawn straight back to the east, on the eastern perimeter, because Alligator Creek. So Marine Command thought that was initially a holding attack, and the main assault was going to come by amphibious assault on Lunga Plain. Everyone thought Ichiki was holding. That was going to be a diversionary attack, and then the main attack was going to come on against Lunga perimeter. Because always, especially in the first 3 or 4 weeks, they said, well, our main threat will be from the sea from the Japanese, because the best place to take Henderson is land straight on Lunga and go straight in. So after they defeated the Japanese there, and then it led up to we're in September, right? So September phrase, nothing's really happening here in Matanikau. Patrols are running back and forth. They don't really get much leeway here. But then we get on the 12th of September, so running into the Battle of Bloody Ridge or Edson's Ridge. So what the Japanese did, they were still landing the majority of their troops at Tavu Point, which is far to the west.
Yeah.
But they did land a contingent of the 124th under Colonel Oka, of Major General Kawaguchi's 35th Brigade, the big counterattack. Part of the internal, I guess, infantry regiment of that brigade, which is the 124th. The commander, headquarter group, and 1 battalion landed to the basically at Tasafaranga, which is on this map here, to the left.
Mm-hmm.
So they've landed to the east. And their job was to move through across Matanikau, then hit the Marine perimeter from the western side. It was a diversionary attack for Kawaguchi coming over Edson's Ridge. So I won't get into that battle, but that didn't occur. Mm-hmm. But what they did, they moved over here, and they left some of their guys, some guard units, at Matanikau. They started digging in because they recognized this is a natural defensive position from the very beginning. So after the Battle of Edson's Ridge, Japanese lost. They did the retreat back. And when they retreated back, where do you think they retreated to? They retreated right to here, to the Matanikau. So Kawaguchi set up forces to guard the mouth of Matanikau. And, hold on, I'll show you. And the One Log Bridge. So this led into the Battle of the Second Matanikau. All right. So Battle of the Second Matanikau started roughly on the 24th of September. So what had occurred on the 18th of September was the first big reinforcement and big resupply for the Americans. And that's when Vandergrift's missing infantry regiment, the 7th Marines, his best regiment, landed. So he was going to use these guys to push the Japanese and destroy the remnants of this brigade that just attacked them, because reports were telling them that the Japanese was disorganized and they were retreating past Matanikau. So he wanted to find out exactly where they were. And plus, he wanted to establish a patrol base at a place, like I said, Kukumbona, which is 5 miles. And he wanted to get some breathing room, he called it, around the perimeter. He wanted to have a bit of breathing room and space around the perimeter. And he wanted to do limited offensive operations to create that space. So one of the most famous Marines of all time, Lieutenant Colonel Chesty Puller's battalion, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, landed. And they said, well, we're going to use Puller because he's a very switched on, aggressive commander. And we're going to send him in reconnaissance and force. At the same time, we're going to use Colonel Edson's first raiders, and we're going to use them to go to Kukumbona and establish a patrol base. And that way they can run patrols out of there. Because Kukumbona at the time was a major trailhead of native trails, junctions, and the government track. So on the 23rd, Puller's battalion went into upper Lunga. They crossed over. Their job was to go across the lower slopes, northern slopes of Mount Austin. They were going to drive through, sweep in, cross at the mouth of Matanikau, and then proceed on down the coastal track to Kukumbona. So once they reached the mouth of Matanikau, then the first raiders were going to join them and proceed in. So that was the plan. So when Puller moved out on 24th of September, you'll see in the bottom of the map here, he got hit by one of the 124th's outposts. So what Kawaguchi, the commander, had done, he set up some outposts called straggler outposts. Because once again, this is only less than, because the end of Edson's Ridge was 14th to 15th September. So this is less than a week. So you still have stragglers moving in from that battle, wounded and stragglers. So they're just straggler collection points. So he had an outpost there, and he had a series of outposts protecting that east-west trail the Japanese had, which is a big jungle trail. So anyway, Pullers ran into one of their groups and got hit. And it was a first real action, and he lost 10 dead and 25 wounded. So they brought 2-5, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines up to assist the next day, and Puller sent 2 of his companies back to escort the stretchers because he had 25 wounded. And I think 18 of them were stretcher, and they had to hand carry those guys all the way back. Plus, you had to rotate the men carrying the stretchers, and he had to have security. So that's why he sent 2 of his whole companies back. But he proceeded with C Company of his group, his battalion, headquarters, and 2-5. So they moved in, and you could see they swept down the river, didn't hit any enemy forces, and they got to the mouth of Matanikau on the 26th. So on the 26th, he says, okay, we'll cross over to Matanikau. So what happened then, he sent 1 company over, and they got hit pretty hard, a 2-5. And then he hit another company, sent another company over. They got hit pretty hard. So I call this Alligator Creek on steroids, or the reverse Alligator Creek. So what we have here is Puller replicating Ichiki. So he's sending waves of Americans across a small sandbar against concentrated machine gun fire. But Puller at least knew to pull his guys back after losing quite a number. You'll find out that the men in 2-5 didn't like Puller at all, because they said he just sent us across. He should have sent the first time, never the second. The G Company got hit real hard. So they called in artillery fire. One point here, you'll see USS Ballard. The only reason I left that in there because it's your last name. But the real ship was the USS Monson, and we know that now, Monson destroyer. But the Ballard has always been, for years. This is from Zimmerman, the Marine historian, but I don't know why for years it was been misidentified. The Monson was misidentified as a Ballard, but it was the USS Monson. Right. So the Monson provided fire support that day. So then they brought Edson up. And Edson at that stage had just taken command of the 5th Marine Regiment. He didn't have his raiders anymore. So the plan for the next day was, okay, what we're going to do is going to push across the Matanikau, but we're going to send our first raiders. It was almost like it's a replication of the first Matanikau. So they were going to use 2-5 to hold the mouth. The raiders were going to go upstream across the one log bridge and come over Hill 73, which is American Memorial, just like you've seen in the first Matanikau, and come straight down on the village. 1-7, the group that had left and carried the stretchers back, which was roughly about 400 of them, under Major Rogers, Ortho Rogers, who was Battalion XO. Because remember, Puller's still on this side of the river. They were going to do an in run and hit on the other side of Point Cruz and come behind. So once again, they were going to trap the Japanese. So it started on the 27th. The Raiders went down. The Japanese had pushed almost 2 platoons over. And then it's a natural bottleneck there at the bottom of Hill 65 and 49. They stopped the Raiders there. Actually killed Ken Bailey, the Raider executive officer who had earned a Medal of Honor less than 2 weeks earlier at Edson's Ridge. Didn't he know he earned or had received it? Sorry, awarded. Some people get upset when I say earned but awarded a medal. So they stopped the Raiders there. So in the fog of war, communications broke down. They thought the Raiders were across the river. So at that stage, they sent 1-7 to do the in-run. So 1-7 did their in-run. They landed. The Japanese had pulled out at that stage to reinforce the mouth. And when they landed, they went up to Hill 84, which is Lankiki Ridge today. So they went up to Hill 84. They said, what's going on? The Japanese responded. They had a fresh unit there to the far left where that question mark is. They had a fresh battalion. So they sent a battalion down, and then the fight was on. So the Marines, in their haste, 1-7 had forgot the radio. And at the same time all this was occurring, they'd made it to the top. The Japanese were coming in. They trapped them, and they were like hitting them pretty hard. They didn't have a radio. There was a guy flying an SPD dive bomber, Dale Leslie. So Dale Leslie flying around, and he sees these T-shirts on Ridge. It says, spelled out help. So he uses blinker light. They had a blinker light in them, and he blinker light to them. And basically said, we're surrounded, And at the same time, once again, it's almost like a perfect storm. a Japanese bombing raid came in, and instead of hitting Henderson Field, they had short drops and hit the division command post and cut out all communications. So they didn't know what was going on there. Most accounts have Leslie then radioing back. Leslie couldn't radio back. He had direct line. He radioed to Edson, communicated Edson what was going on, but he couldn't communicate to the division. So every account I read said he communicated back. But I've inherited the late John Ennis's research library of Guadalcanal, and he has a personal account by Leslie. What Leslie said, he flew back to the airfield, briefed the command at the operations command, their air operations command, and what was going on, refueled, rearmed with his gunner Reed, and flew back to provide support. So that makes a lot of sense because he's only like 2 minutes to 3 minutes away from the airfield.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't communicate. So anyway, he's flew in, and the USS Monson is coming back. He's coming back with his ships because they know there to evacuate him. So they've landed, and that's when you got the Douglas Munro, U.S. Coast Guard Douglas Munro action. He awarded the Medal of Honor. And
little Dunkirk.
Yeah, Little Dunkirk. So they managed to get the Marines out there. And at the same time, they tried to get 2-5 across the river again, and they were smashed at the Matanikau. So like I said, I don't want to get too much into this battle, but that was probably the biggest defeat the U.S. had during the operation. So they all withdrew then at the end of that day. So that ended the Second Matanikau. But what are the importance of the Second Matanikau? This is where the U.S. really recognized the importance here of the Matanikau River. They said, if we can hold the Matanikau or keep the Japanese away from it, then that would give us a barrier to protect Henderson Field. We know that. But if we want to destroy the Japanese, we're going to have to push west across this river. So we're going to have to get across this river. So this is going to be our main focal point of this campaign. You know, if we want to keep the Japanese from taking Henderson, we got to keep them away from this river. And if we want to destroy the Japanese, we got to push across this river eventually. So they started thinking, well, this is the key to Henderson Field. Whoever holds this river, especially the mouth of Matanikau, will hold Henderson Field. It's the key. Well, the Japanese didn't really switch on at that stage. Once again, they were slow to recognize what's going on. But the guys on the ground, like Major General Kawaguchi, realized how important this was. So this is what it brings us into the Japanese Operation X plan. They said, okay, well, the October battle. We know the Americans are there. They're not leaving, and we're going to destroy them. So they've got air power. So how are we going to do this? First, we have to suppress the airfield, right? Once we suppress the airfield and destroy the air power, then we can bring in our large transports. Because before that, they were bringing in small destroyer transports at night. Because they ruled the night, the Americans ruled the day. Any transports caught out during the day were going to get smashed by the American air power. So the Japanese they realized we have to neutralize, and they actually used, I forgot how they say it in Japanese, suppress the airfield. Once we suppress the airfield, then we can have this large convoy, they call it the fast convoy, of transport ships that would allow us to offload our tanks, a massive amount of supplies, troops, all in one go, right? A concentration of force all in one go. Because as you know, on Guadalcanal with the climate, if you drop a unit off there, after 1 week, it starts to lose its offensive, strength due to starting to get sick, the heat, and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But if you piecemeal drop your units in for a large assault, the first guys you dropped off, say 3 weeks earlier, are going to be spent. So you want to try to drop them off in one packet. So Japanese knew they had to suppress the airfield. So how are we going to do that? Well, easy. We're going to bring in all this massive amount of artillery at night on some seaplane carriers, and we're going to establish a firing base, right? They call it the firing base. Now, they had 150 millimeter howitzers and 100 millimeter guns. The howitzers were 10 miles, and that's at a maximum. You don't want to fire your guns at maximum range because you'll burn them out. And you start doing mechanical faults, and especially using a lot of powder. with the breaches and things like that. So they obviously didn't want to fire at max range. So ideal range for them was about 5 miles. That's great. So where are they going to do that? They said our artillery firing base will be on the east bank of the Matanikau. Plus, we're going to bring tanks over. The only place you're going to cross the Matanikau is a mouth with heavy vehicles, which is like artillery tractors to bring in heavy, and tanks. That's the only place you're going to cross is the mouth, that sandbar, natural sandbar, low tide. And that's where the government road went. This map's not correct, but it went over the mouth of Matanikau. This is a now and then. So the one on the bottom is a then photo. And you can see how the mouth of Matanikau was, and that's how the jungle is, or how it was. So the hills are barren, and then you get the jungle. So that river mouth, that was the only place you can cross. So that's the importance. The Japanese said, we need to take that east bank. Once we take the east bank, one, they give us a artillery platform, and plus what it would also give us, it was a jumping off point. So we can attack down the coast, and plus we can go into the inland ridges on the east-west trail, take the ridges on the west side of Henderson Field, put direct fire weapons on there, and start to dominate that airfield. And if we can neutralize the airfield with our large artillery, then we can bring in the transports, and then we can bring in supplies, much supplies as we want or whatever. We first have to dominate, establish an artillery platform. So that was their plan. But the Americans had a different plan. They wanted to take it, right, and wanted to hold it. So that leads us to this battle here. To me, is the most important battle of the campaign, right? Most pivotal battle of the campaign. The American officers, high command, like Thomas, Colonel Thomas, who is Division Chief of Staff, 1st Marine Division Chief of Staff, and Lieutenant Colonel Merrill Twining, which was Division Planning Officer. They call them D3s then. They recognized, and Vandergrift recognized the importance of holding this river. And this went to the 3rd Battle of Matanikau. So what they wanted to do was, the Japanese, they wanted Kawaguchi to push forward and take it. But Kawaguchi's guys were half strength, had lost so many men. I forgot the exact quote, but he says, if I seen any men over on the other side of the river, they're just fodder for artillery and airstrikes. But Hawataki, who was the Lieutenant General Hawataki, who was the Japanese overall 17th Army commander, ordered him to go over. So he sent a piecemeal force over. But at the same time, the 4th Infantry Regiment, Aoba Detachment of the 2nd Division, which was going to be the main striking division the Japanese were going to use for this offensive, had landed. So he was given orders to take that eastern firing platform on the other side of the river. So he sent one company over on the 5th. On the 5th of October. So had one Japanese company had moved 500 yards down. So here you'll see that little red, horseshoe shaped on the east side of the river. Well, at the time they were 500 yards down in a nice little neat bottleneck. And I found that bottleneck in some natural defensive terrain. Once again, the terrain hadn't changed in 80-something years. I mean, if you've got an eye for the ground, you can work out. And that's the importance of walking the ground and studying it. So you can work it out. So anyway, the Marines, their plan was to move down it was going to be the biggest operation they'd had, biggest land operation they'd had on the campaign. So what are they going to do? Once again, all these replicate the 1st and 2nd, roughly the same plan. Hold the river, sweep. Hold the river, envelop, trap the river. They are. So we use the 5th Marines under Edson. They were going to come down, 2 battalions of the 5th Marines. We're going to come down and then hold at the mouth. If they could, they would push over. At the same time, the 7th Marines, and then with the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Marines attached. So basically, 7th Marines had 2 battalions and had attached 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Marines. So roughly 3 battalions, regimental strength. And then you had a group called the Whaling Group. So Bill Whaling was there's a lot of information here. Bill Whalen was the a colonel that had formed a group of scout snipers, and about 100 guys in it, and they attached themselves to 3-2. So Whalen was I think, tactical commander on the ground, even though Edson was a commander too. So the plan was 5th Marine's going to once again hold or potentially push across. The next day, the 7th Marines were going to cross at the One Log Bridge. That replicates One Log Bridge right there. Not replicates, but that's the One Log Bridge, 2,000 yards upstream. And then there's a series of ridges. And what they were going to do is go to peel. You can see them peeling down. So Whaling Group takes the first ridge group, 2-7 takes the second, and 1-7 was going to take the left, but they were going to protect the 2-7's left flank. That was the plan. So what happened was, the Japanese had a plan too. The Japanese plan was on the 8th of October. They were going to push the whole 4th Regiment over and secure the East Bank once and for all. So you had 2 operations occurring at the same time. 2 offensive operations occurred at the same time, but the Americans beat them to the draw, so to speak. So on the 7th, they came through. They hit the small Japanese reinforced company 500 yards east, which the reinforced company slowly withdrew back and formed in a little pocket there. And then the 5th Marines couldn't reduce the pocket. They tried overnight. And then the rain started pouring pretty hard. The 7th Marines, they came in the ridges, and they had went down to the river. So that's the end of the first day. So the second day, they had the orders to reduce the pocket, and the 7th Marines were going to move over the river. But the rain delayed them. So Vandegrift took a gamble. He goes, well, we'll proceed. We'll still proceed with the attack, because they thought, well, the Japanese already withdrew. He goes, well, I'll take that risk, so be it. So anyway, the next day, or that night, the Japanese tried to break out from the pocket. They killed a lot of raiders, I think 12 of them, but they basically died to the man. So that pocket was reduced. The next day, that night, the Marines had moved over on Hill 66, and they started their sweeps on the 9th. So sweeping, no problem. Most of the Japanese had pulled back. But at this stage, Vandegrift had received some information from naval intelligence. So, Navy man, what was occurring what was some information probably on the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th that they started receiving that the Japanese were doing naval-wise?
Of October, that would be the effort to knock out Henderson Field with the battleships Haruna.
Yeah. So at that stage, the Japanese were building up the combined fleet. So they were getting ready to land this fast convoy. And they're going to have the combined fleet standing by, right, to potentially draw the Americans out. So there was a lot of activity going on. So that word came back from Vandegrift, and they said, well, okay, the Japanese are coming down. What are they going to do? They're probably going to hit us head on, or are going to hit Henderson Field. So I need to pull everyone back. So the orders were, okay, start pulling back. And they started pulling back. They've pulled back. And this is where you get Puller and Ravine and a few other incidents. But yeah, they pulled back. But what it did was it stopped the Japanese from gaining that offensive platform, which led to the bombardment, for the naval bombardment. So Hayataki had landed. He landed on the 9th. And when he's landed on the 9th, he was ordered to go to Guadalcanal and take personal command, even though he was still running the operation in New Guinea, because his headquarters were in Rabaul. So he was running both campaigns from basically a jungle gorge at Cucambona from here. But he landed on 9th and met all these guys from the 4th Infantry had just got smashed. And they said, we've destroyed, and the Americans are on the move. And he's going, oh, geez, and we've lost our artillery firing platform. So they reassessed this situation. They said, we've lost our artillery firing platform. What are we going to do? Then Admiral Yamamoto says, look, we'll just hit them with a bombardment group. I got another idea. We'll send this naval bombardment group. We'll do it once and for all. We'll just smash just blow the whole place to pieces, the airfield, with these battleships. And that's what led to the October 13th, 14th naval bombardment. But the key to this battle here, it stopped the Japanese plans. It stopped them from gaining that firing platform and that offensive jump-off platform for the Operation X. So they had to go back to the drawing board. They go, what do we do now? We've lost it. How are we going to react? So that's made the Japanese come up with another plan. So that's when we go down to this battle here, which leads us to the Battle of Henderson Field. This is the 23rd to the 26th of October. And once again, you'll be able to tell your groups or I'll say to anyone, go and look at the naval engagements that happened around this time and happened with the naval bombardment of the airfield with the battleships and what occurred and how they were able to land, the Japanese land a lot of stuff, especially with the tanks. So this led to the plan. So the plan was to take the bulk of the division, 2nd Division, which would be 3 regiments, because they had the 230th Regiment of the 38th Division added to them then. They were going to proceed south around Mount Austin, so that's Mount Austin at the bottom, with a 15-mile track. They were going to cut through the jungle. They thought they could do it. They had 5 days to do it, and they thought they could do it. And what they were going to do is they're going to hit on the far right there. They're going to hit the Americans in an they didn't think there's many Americans there. So they said, we'll come out of the jungle, use the Bloody Ridge plan that Kawaguchi used in September, and come straight over Bloody Ridge there, or Edson's Ridge, and just go straight down and peel off and attack 600 meters to the east of it. Well, another detachment was going to cross with engineers. I don't know if you can see it. You got the Lunga River, which is Henderson Field there. You got the Lunga River. Just to the left of there is a place called, the Japanese called the Kuma Ridges. Americans didn't have a name for it. But my friend Rich Frank says this is a very important piece of terrain, and it's never mentioned in the histories because there's no fighting for it, even though the Americans defended it heavily and reinforced it heavily. Because if the Japanese could put direct fire weapons on that ridge, just on the other side of the river from Henderson, it could dominate Fighter Field 1 there and Henderson Strip with direct fire weapons. It could be 37 millimeter or whatever, or even machine guns. It would cause Americans a lot of pain, and that was what the Americans were afraid of. And that was one of the Japanese plans, was to take that ridges too. But anyway, at the same time, their plan, they knew the Americans was focused on Matanikau, and that was where the biggest threat was going to come from. So what the Americans did, after they were pulled back, they left 2 battalions. Vandergrift says, look, I'm not going to give up the Matanikau. So he took a risk and left 2 battalions to dig in at the mouth of Matanikau after the Battle of the 3rd. So he's left 3-1, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, and 3-7 on the mouth. So what 3-1 had done, they had dug in, I don't know, let's see if I can get a, and they established the heaviest or strongest U.S. defenses in the campaign, right there at the mouth of Matanikau. I'll see if I can get I've got a good photo here. I'll just pull it up. Nice color one too. It's coming in now. There we go. I love this photo. So this is a colored photo. So this is looking west. So that's the mouth of Matanikau. So what you see on the bottom left is an American 37 millimeter anti-tank bunker, an anti-tank gun in that bunker. And you can see how thin the mouth is, or how small it is. And now you've got to attack. That's a focal point for attacking. So what the Americans did, they dug 37 millimeters in. They dug, had improvised electronic anti-tank mines in the sandbar. They had machine guns. They had 75 millimeter half tracks, self-propelled half track. They had a couple of them there. And they had the whole area on the other side, like pre-registered with just a crazy amount of artillery and ladders. Because you only had about 500 yards between Hill 78 and the coast. And they just had, I think it was something like 5 or 6. I forgot the figures in my book, but like 5 or 6 batteries, almost 40, 50 guns, pre-registered in there, overlapping all the way to Point Cruz, so 2,000 yards by about 500 or 600 yards. And any attacking force, they'd just go fire, and they would just fire up and down in ladders, overlapping ladders. I forgot what someone said. It was a plan for extermination or something like that. But anyway, that was the strongest point the Americans had. And then upriver near the One Log Bridge, 3-7 covered it. And they had One Log Bridge with mines and booby traps, and that strong position. So basically, I'll go back to this one. So the plan was, the Japanese said, well, that's the American strongest position. That's where they expect us to attack. So what the Japanese are going to do with their depleted 4th Regiment and a tank company, they're going to, this is all going to be coordinated attacks, by the way. And they were going to attack there first to draw the Americans there. Colonel Oka, which is that little red line, which is the flanking one, he didn't come across that way. They come down from the south. That map's wrong. I've got maps in my book. It corrects these. But Oka was going to come with a regiment and come across and cut those 2 American battalions off at the mouth. Same time, then you had this major assault with about 6,500 Japanese coming streaming out of the jungle straight into the southern line there. Well, I won't spend too much time on this. What happened was the attack kept getting delayed in the jungle holding them back because they got to try to go through. They underestimated the jungle, building a small trails only to try to hide themselves from the Americans. The engineers cut a path probably about 2 or 3 feet wide, still leaving the overhead cover to protect them. So they scored a intelligence coup over the Americans because Americans didn't realize the Japanese were there, which was good. But the Americans had counted on the jungle to be their ally. They said, well, if any unit has to push through that jungle, they're going to be so attritionally spent and disorganized and attrited, which would prove to be the fact, because I won't get into what occurred down there, but that didn't occur too well at the Battle of Henderson Field, and that's where you see John Basilone and Poland and the 164th Regiment really defeat the Japanese there. What happened at the Mouth Matanikau? Uncoordinated. They were supposed to attack on the 23rd. It kept delayed. Okay, 5 o'clock, 23rd, all elements attack. So on the 23rd, the Japanese come across the mouth in a tank attack. Mm-hmm. I've got the history of the tank regiment. The tank commander didn't want to go first because they'd done some feeler attacks like 2 or 3 days before, just to test out the sand and test out the American defenses, and they lost a tank. And they said, well, the sand's a bit, I don't know if it's going to hold us. And I think the tank commander, the company commander was told, well, that's the way it's going to be, and you get to lead the assault. And so what he wanted to do was do the old Japanese fillet, sorry, this is an Australian accent coming out now. What's the American? What's a fillet of fish? Fillet.
Fillet.
Fillet. Oh, in Australia they call it fillet. They call it fillet in Australia. But yeah, the flaying tactics, like they did in Malaya. You know how they find a line of communication and drive straight down it with tanks or mobile, and then have the infantry on the side. And that's what he wanted to do. He said, take the infantry, attack across, take the mouth, and then we can just go past the infantry. And they said, no, you get to lead the assault. So he led the assault. Long story short, only one tank made it to the other side. So that's 2 of the tanks there. I mean, there's a famous photo. It shows 5 tanks.
How many tanks were there total?
There was 12 tanks landed. On the night of the 23rd, they attacked with 9 tanks, top 97s and 95s. And some of them bogged down or got stuck in the sand, which they thought. One actually made it across and crushed an American machine gun bunker. Americans got out and then used it to go up the ramp, and then it got caught on the back of the bunker. And that's when you had PFC Champagne And in my book, I really go into detail because I've got the account from one of the guys in his squad, from his son, which I'll put in there, and actually has some good details in my book, where Champagne puts a grenade in the dolly well, loads of disables the tank, loses his hearing, which you won't find any other account, and then Half Track was backed out. And I said a great display of driving skills, backed out and fired a couple of rounds, and killed the tank commander and destroyed the tank. And then the artillery just blasted on the other side, and the one battalion attacked across, well, 2 companies. The 1 battalion was in its assembly points, and the artillery just destroyed them. They didn't even reach the line of departure. So that attack petered out. So this is from the American position, and Point Cruz is off to the right there. So basically what happened then, Colonel Oka, with his diversionary attack from the south here, was nowhere to be seen. So he didn't attack at all. He attacked the next day, by the way, and that was where we're with 2-7 up on the ridge with Mitchell Page earning his Medal of Honor actions. And Oka was a bit delayed. And then when they attacked, they only attacked with one battalion instead of 3. Piecemeal, uncoordinated attacks. But that draws me back to the whole Battle of Third Matanikau, because that threw the wrench, or Australian spanner, but it threw a wrench in the gears of the Japanese plans. It threw a wrench in the gears, and they had to devise this other plan, which is way out there. Some of Hayataki's staff said, we can't do this, and they said, yeah, we can do it. We think we can do it because that's, we're Japanese, and this is surprise attacks and go where they don't think we are, and speed, shock, surprise. You use our strengths, but unfortunately the uncoordinated attacks. And Twining basically said if the Japanese had managed to coordinate their attacks, they had a good plan, and we would have been, he said, wouldn't have been defeated, but we would have been in a lot of trouble if they'd managed to do that. But see, the Japanese had, unlike Edson's Ridge, they had plenty. They had follow-on forces. So they had you had the unit with the Japanese air crews, airfield repair, and I've got the orders from the guys that were attacked from the south. They were given specific orders not to destroy any buildings, not to burn any buildings, because the Japanese were going to plan to use the airfield as soon as they took it. Mm-hmm. They had planes and Rabaul ready to fly in. They were going to land, follow up, because that was the thing with, the big thing about Bloody Ridge. If
were they going to land troops on the airfield?
No, they were going to land amphibious assault with a reinforced battalion, and then they had some airfield units there, and they had bombs and had like the stuff ready to go, like a quick airfield repair unit and replenishment unit. They were going to land them once the airfield was taken by the 2nd Division. Mm-hmm. Then they were going to quickly land, get it ready to go, and then the planes from Rabaul were going to probably land in roughly the same day. And as you know, the combined fleet was setting up to the north. And they were really getting frustrated because their fuel was running out. They had 2 weeks of fuel because of these delays. But their plan was to draw the American fleet out, and that led to what battle?
Santa Cruz.
Yeah, the big Santa Cruz battle. So all this was happening. This is like kind of a good epic point. But once again, it draws back to Matanikau, on that third battle of Matanikau, that really stopped the Japanese. So once again, I know we're trying to zoom through these. So that would go to the Americans knew after this, they'd pushed the Japanese back. Right? They'd said, okay, we've hurt the Japanese, and the Japanese were on the defensive, in the retreat. So this is the best time to strike back. So Vandergrift said, look, my guys are pretty much spent because, malaria, sickness, and they've had casualties, and just knots and knots and knots and not sleeping. But they still had some guys. You go, look, I'll use the 5th Marines. I'll bring the 2nd Marines over from Tulagi, 2 battalions, and we'll do on the 1st of November, we'll have a major assault, counterattack, and we'll push the Japanese all the way back to Kukumbana for good, man. We got a chance to get them. And plus, also, I've got a whole division of Japanese. We know there's a lot of Japanese in the interior. So if we can hit Cucamonga, we'll cut off their supply line and trailhead. And then we've got a whole division out there in the jungle. It's just going to rot, leave them to rot. And that way we destroy these Japanese. So here's a good chance we'll strike when the iron's hot. So basically that led to the 1st of November offensive, and I call it the 4th Battle of Matanikau. So real quick. Yeah, so this was led by, once again, it was led by Whaling and Edson. And I thought I had it. Anyway, it's not here. But I'll put this one up. So the plan was to basically push across at Point Cruz. That's a good photo there. That's looking west, and there's the hill numbers that the Americans had. So push across the river, put 3 footbridges there because they knew before the mouth Matanikau was probably going to be defended. So we'll put footbridges up. They've been running patrols, and the Japanese had got switched on. They said, well, if we build defenses at the mouth Matanikau, they're just going to smash us with artillery. So what we're going to do is we're going to put dummy positions, they called it, and some small outposts there, but we're going to build our main line. And if you look to the left here, Hill 84, 83, 82, they started building reverse slope defenses in there. Basic machine clusters, supporting machine gun cluster in depth with knee mortars, which is the top 19 grenade launchers. Americans call them knee mortars, and riflemen would support these clusters of machine guns. And that way, using the terrain, those small groups could hold up a lot of Americans or attacking defense. So you've noticed you got Point Cruz, you got Hill 84. There's a small area. So if you go to Honiari today, there's a ditch at the Central Police Station. The Japanese call it Little River. So that's a very important piece, natural defense. So between Hill 84 and the coast is about 400 to 500 yards. So that's a natural bottleneck. So what the Japanese did, they formed their defensive line there with screening and dummy posts on the Matanikau. So what they were going to do is we're going to dig in here. We're going to wait for our next set of reinforcements because they just lost. We're going to have another go at the Americans. But at the meantime, we just need to hold this line. And that's what they did. They dug in positions here. So when the Americans attacked, they moved through no problem. Then they got to the end of Hill 78, which is in the far left of this photo where the Parliament House is now. And then they got hit pretty hard. 1st Battalion, 5th Marines on the 1st of November. So 1-5 got hit pretty hard there. And that's when Anthony Casameto earned the Medal of Honor for his actions there, later awarded. And they got hit pretty hard. And 2-5 was moving over, and they basically swept. Long story short, the Japanese fought there for 2 days. And they got the Japanese in a series of small pockets. And the pocket, if you look on some of the maps, some of the authors, all the authors, have the pocket at Point Cruz. It wasn't at Point Cruz. It was at the base of Hill 84 there. And that little, that's where the pocket was against Hill 84. So they end up destroying the Japanese there. So this took us to November the 3rd. Bang, the way was cleared to push through to Cucamonga. In Cucamonga, you can see, I don't know if you can see the little duck head there. Is that on their screen? Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, the duck head's covering Cucamonga. That's where Cucamonga is. That's where they had to go. Well, basically where the duck head is. So once again, what's happening naval-wise, because all these, they play into each other. So intels come from Halsey. Halsey's the commander now. Yay, Halsey. But, no, sorry. Take it back. Coley Point, all the way to the east side, intelligence is saying the Japanese are going to land a whole division there. So some of the remnants from the southern attack had set up on Coley Point. Japanese originally were going to land a whole division there, but then Japanese high command says, no, it's probably not a great idea because we're going to cut our forces in half. So we'll land them. We've got a contingent there. We'll land a small group there, resupply them. They can make their way back. But the Americans thought they were going to potentially land the whole division. So the intel came in. So they sent 2-7 with Hanneken out to have a look. Then they got in a bit of a fight, and they didn't know what was going on. They said, "Oh, we got a major group of Japanese going to be landed to our east." So what happened again? Just like with the 3rd Matanikau, stop what you're doing. Everyone pull back. So they pull all the way back across Matanikau, back to the east side. Let's deal with Coley Point. They left a small group of Americans. On this one, they left a small group of Americans on their 2nd Marines around Hill 84 there, and Hill 94, just to hold the ground. They formed a horseshoe shape. They're going to deal with Coley Point. Then they're going to renew the offensive. That's what happened. They dealt with Coley Point. So on the 10th of November, they sent the newly arrived 8th Marines and to join the 2nd Marines and one of the Army battalions, 164, at Hill 94 to push on. So 10th and 11th, they were going quite well. They were pushing the Japanese back, and they almost reached Kukumbona, right? They almost said, well, we finally done it. This is the 11th of November. So what's happening now, naval-wise?
The beginning of the naval battle for Guadalcanal, 12th, 13th, and then
14th, 15th, yeah.
Right, 15th.
So the major naval battles of Guadalcanal, the battleship on battleship, the kind of the naval turning point of the campaign. So, Ultra, the intelligence, Halsey's headquarters, we got a major Japanese fleet coming down. This is their 2nd attempt, and it was their 3rd attempt. This was going to be the big one. Before they had like 4 fast transports, had 11 fast transports to land the whole division. They're going to do it once and for all. We're going to knock these Americans out. We're going to do this right. We're going to replicate the battleship bombardment. We're going to come in. We're going to smash we did a good job last time. We're going to smash the airfield. Then we're just going to land everyone in one go. All 11 transports. Bang. Then we're just going to go in with a 38th Division, 2nd Division. We're going to push down across the Matanikau and just keep driving on. That was their plan. So this time, Vandegrift pulled everyone back to guard the airfield. Then left the 8th Marines holding the Matanikau. He didn't want to do it, and a lot of them were like some of the 2nd Marine guys going, man, we just fought and bled. They lost a lot of men taking that area. But Vandegrift didn't have a choice because, once again, the number one priority of the whole thing was the airfields, protect the airfields. But regrettably, he pulled his guys back. So, as we know, the naval battles were fought, and the outcomes were not great for the Japanese. They lost. But after that was done and dusted, it was time for round 5 of the Matanikau. We're almost there. You can just see how this is starting to. The Matanikau is involved in everything. So that leads us to. Let me show real quick. It leads us to the 5th Battle of Matanikau, and this time the Army had basically taken over. The Marines are still there. The 1st Marine Division was still there. This elements of the 2nd was coming in with the 2nd Regiment and they're already there, but the 8th Regiment. So here's some of the Japanese positions. So General Seabury was the Western commander. He's the assistant division commander of the Matanikau Division, which the majority of them had started to arrive by then. So their plan, they were going to do it nice and set piece battle like the Army had done. Doctrine would tell them. What they were going to do is they were going to send this fresh, brand new National Guard unit, the 182nd. They'd only been on the island a week. They were going to push across the Matanikau to this first line there where that first arrow is. Once they were there, they were going to set up and form a defensive line. Nice set piece battle, right? And then once they formed a defensive line, the Army was going to bring over more supplies, bring in over their artillery. Then once they did that, then the 8th Marines were going to come over. And then they were going to push on all the way to Kukumbona. You can see Kukumbona there. Nice set piece battle. The 164th Regiment was in Division Reserve. So we're looking in the 18th of November. The attack started. 182nd come across. They had a Marine company just assisting them. 8th Marines. So they came across. they established position on 66 and 78, and they got hit pretty hard. The Japanese sent a fresh company, and they hit them pretty hard at Point Cruz on a bit of a counterattack at night. This is the first time these guys in action. Less than a week on the island, they sent these guys in the first to lead the assault, to take that line. The Japanese hit them. That battalion, the first battalion, 182nd, I wouldn't say bugged out completely, but 3 of their companies kind of broke and moved back. And it took the Seabury and a number of officers to personally rally them and stop the withdrawal. They withdrew about 400 yards. They got a bloody nose. Fortunately for the Americans, the Japanese didn't have enough men to push, to take advantage of their push, because they had plans to take back that side of the Matanikau. They were still on the offensive, remember. The Japanese were still thinking about the offensive. Even though they'd lost their fleet in November, they're thinking about another round. They've never not given up. But anyway, over the course of the next 3 or 4 days, the 8th Marines got put in, the 164th got put in, and they just bled themselves dry on these ridges. And then that stopped on the 23rd of November. Then it turned into 6 weeks of no man's land. At that stage, both sides were offensively spent. The 1st Division, Marine Division, had pulled out. The Maricao Division was there, and the elements of the 25th U.S. Army Division was slowly coming in. So Major General Alexander Patch had now taken over from Vandergrift. He was the Army commander. He took command of the whole U.S. effort. So he knew in December, the Japanese knew too, they couldn't go on the offensive. The Americans couldn't go on the offensive. And they basically a stalemate here for 6 weeks. Here and in Mount Austin. They're on Mount Austin. And they're at the Point Cruz line. What this last battle did, though, from the 18th to 23rd, it finally secured the Americans that side of the river. From then on, the Japanese never had that side of the Matanikau. So at least that side of the Matanikau was secured, enough for the Americans to never give it up again. Mm-hmm. So once again, between Point Cruz and there's still only a mile. So all this fighting's in here. So it was no man's land, patrol, sniping, raids for 6 weeks here. It was something you read out of a World War I book. So on the 10th of January, the new offensive started with the Army. So the plan was to take Mount Austin. They did. They took Mount Austin and isolated it. And then the 2nd Marine Division had landed on the 4th of January. So the 6th Marines Regiment, the headquarters, and some more unit to form the division for the first time. So they had responsibility of this coast here. So on the 13th of January, the 8th Marines and the 2nd Marines were given the green light, and they attacked these. And the 8th Marines had bled itself dry on the 23rd of November here. So it come up with some innovative tactics. They said, well, we can't attack this head on. So what they did was they attacked in the upper ravine because they knew the Japanese had put machine guns to fire down the ravines, enfiladed fire. So they started attacking an echelon. So they'd take out the top of the ravine, take them out first, and then the other companies could attack. They have used innovative. That kind of scared me. Who is that? Is that your dog?
Dog, yeah. Let me mute the mic here.
That's all right. We're almost there. So another innovative tactic they use is the first time where the Division G3 flew over the battlefield and could get real-time intelligence. What they did too, the first time flamethrowers were ever used by the Marines or the U.S. military. At the same time, the Army had them on Mount Austin, but they didn't work. But the Marines had used them that day on the 15th of January. They used them successfully with 4 flamethrowers. They're also using techniques such as they distributed on how many shotguns in the battalions. They brought up the 37 millimeter anti-tank guns. They'd used canister rounds to blast off the vegetation because a lot of these Japanese bunkers were heavily camouflaged, and then the other rounds would fire into them. They were using fuel drums with TNT blocks. They'd roll them up to the bunkers because once they knew they took out a couple of the rear supporting bunkers and they could approach the Japanese forward bunkers, they took them out first, and they were just blowing them up using the gasoline. The They integrated engineers into the rifle squads for demolition. They were developing the later Pacific War corkscrew and blowtorch techniques you've seen. They were starting to implement these. But yeah, they were using some innovative tactics. They had to, because there's the only way you're going to crack this line. So after the 18th, the Japanese started pulling back, and then the line broke. And because, as you might know, the Japanese Hayataki on the island didn't know they were evacuating to the 14th. But the Japanese High Command on the 31st of December, after the emperor gave his permission and his blessing, they decided to evacuate Guadalcanal. But they didn't tell the guys on the ground. Well, when I say the guys on the ground, I mean the senior army commander there, Hayataki and his staff, until the 14th. They sent 2 staff members in to personally tell them. He didn't take the news well, but then he said, okay, we'll do that. And then they slowly started moving back. And as you know, the evacuation was an intelligence coup too of the Americans, because Halsey and staff thought that was another attempt to reinforce. But then that was why Patch only had 1 regiment moving through the leapfrog to go down the coast. He didn't, because he was trying to protect the airfield. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's really it. I know we spent an hour on that. Sorry about that. Or hour and 15 minutes.
All right. I talk about it all day. Well, so let me ask you, where in is the Heritage Park? Is this the beach for the Little Dunkirk beach, the Monroe Beach? Is that where
you're talking about Heritage Park Hotel?
Heritage Park Hotel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So where the Heritage Park Hotel is the landing beach, roughly in that area. Mm-hmm. And the withdrawal beach had 2 withdrawal beaches, about 150 yards apart. They're 2 small beaches. So where the Yacht Club, Breakwater Cafe, they call it now, to mm-hmm. Heritage Park, that was the evacuation and the landing area. And they basically went straight up Hill 84, which is Lankiki Ridge today, and they went where the central police station is. Mm-hmm. They've advanced across there. And there's still 18 Marines from there. And that brings me to another point. U.S. military in that area missing to this day. I'd say there's still 60 to 80 unmarked graves in that area, and probably hundreds of Japanese. Because, like I said before at the start, the Americans concreted over that whole area, and they built a base there in 43, 44, which is unfortunate. Well, it wasn't unfortunate at the time. We had a base to build, but and the DPAA, the American military teams, are there every year, mm-hmm. and they're doing some good work. They're finding the missing Americans, which is good.
I actually spent yesterday afternoon with Jeff Raker recording a video like this where we talk specifically about the missing.
Yeah, and when you go there, a lot of tourists don't even know. Even the war groups, the U.S. war groups that go there, they don't even know the hotels they're staying in, where all the main tourist hotels, as you know, is in this Point Cruz, Matanikau area. They don't know the heaviest fighting is there. I was there when I was there with the Australian Federal Police. I overheard American tour group. I heard one of their participants ask them, their tour guide. They said, "What's happened here? Did anything happen here? Not much happened around here. We're going to Bloody Ridge today." Oh. And I was like, overheard. I was like, "Oh my God, what?" I said, and I looked up. I said, "I can point out 3 Medal of Honor actions right now. This is the most heaviest fought over area in the campaign. It's underneath your feet. You don't even know it." And you know that little ditch? You'll go by the Central Police Station. If you're ever there next time, look at that little ditch. The Little River Ditch is one of the most important little pieces of terrain, and people don't even know anything about it. Of course, you need to look at, obviously, the Bloody Ridge, Alligator Creek, Mount Austin, but yeah, Matanikau needs a lot of, and hopefully my book will.
Yeah, that's a good segue to your book. Tell me a little bit about that.
What I'll do, I'll see if I can bring the cover up. Yeah, so there's the cover of my book. It's called Guadalcanal's Longest Fight, Pivotal Battles on the Matanikau Front. It's due to come out in America on the 15th of October this year, in the UK in late August of this year. Casemate is a publisher. It can be pre-ordered now. It can be pre-ordered through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, straight through the publisher at Casemate. I mean, if you type in Guadalcanal's Longest Fight, Dave Holland, I think Japanese have it, Canadian sites. It's all over the place. You can order it, pre-order it. So, and the Ford's is currently being written by, I don't know if you know him. He's a well-known Marine Corps and Army historian, retired now, John Hoffman. John Hoffman wrote the definitive biography of Puller and Edson. And he was one of my mentors for this. So, yeah, he's writing the forward as we speak.
Excellent.
So, yeah, hopefully it's my first book. So, but I know it will actually add a missing part of the campaign.
Yeah.
So to me, the best overall book is Richard Frank's Guadalcanal, followed by Sam Griffin's Battle of Guadalcanal. Once again, this would be a good companion to that, because they go over the top of the waves on that, but this dives deep and gets into the Matanikau. And also cover, because, you can't go over Guadalcanal, have something about Guadalcanal without linking in the air and naval. I do talk about, and the other battles too, I do link them in, but I don't spend a lot of time, say, for example, on Alligator Creek or Edson's Ridge, because there's great books about it. My friend William Bosch wrote probably the definitive one on Alligator Creek. And then Joseph Alexander's Edson's Raiders is probably the best, I think, on Edson's Ridge. But there's other battles for that. And my next project, after this, and I'm currently working on a book as we speak on the U.S. Army on Guadalcanal. There's only been one book on that, and that was 1949, the official green book, they call it, of the U.S. Army. There's definitely one that needs to be on that. So.
Well, thank you for devoting your time and attention to these lesser reported portions of the Guadalcanal campaign. I think you're adding some critical pieces of information to the scholarship on the subject. So.
Well, I'm hoping that's my goal, and also too, I've written it for a lot of veterans not many veterans around, but their families, especially some of the units that, like the Army and the 2nd Division, because they find nothing about their relatives' units or involvement, and there's a big missing part of that. So, and I've written it basically for all audiences. It's not it could be because I was approached by an academic publisher to publish it, and also, but I wanted it to go out to everyone. I just wanted the information to go out, and especially to the families and the people who don't really know about the Matanikau, to understand what their relatives done and to get more on their relatives. So.
Well, thank you for that. And Dave, thank you for your time. I'm sorry I'm going to miss you on the island this year, but
yeah, I'm going back. I'm missing you too. I wish we could have hooked up, but yeah, maybe next time.
I think the MHT tour group this year, you're going to be on the group. Jeff Raker is going to be in the group. It's going to be a fantastic.
And Joe Mueller, who's been going there since the 70s. Oh, Joe.
Mueller. So terrific. All right. Well, thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it. Enjoy your Saturday. And hey, do they celebrate Father's Day in Australia?
I could make a joke there, but won't. Not on this day. They do, but it's not this day. They celebrate Mother's Day the same in the States, but not Father's Day. So,
well, here this Sunday is Father's Day in the U.S. So.
Oh, happy Father's Day!
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, take care. Be well.
All right. See you, Jeff.